Aloha. Welcome to the 2022 Maui County Candidate Interviews. Today we have with us Dan Johnson, who's running for State Representative for District 12. Dan, welcome. Nice to have you with us.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. Nice to be here. Thanks for the invite.
So, Dan, if you could just give us a little bit about your background. First of all, your civic engagement here in the county and why you feel from your background that you're qualified to run for this very important office of state representative.
Yeah, so as for me, I was born and raised in Maui. This has always been my home, and I care deeply about my community. And I see more and more people finding it difficult, increasingly more difficult to live here. Cost of living is becoming more of a problem as time goes on. And, I have my own family members that have been forced to leave the island. Some cousins that have now live in the mainland just because they couldn't find a path to home ownership or good job, whatever it was, different causes. But yeah, I don't plan on living anywhere else. I don't have anywhere else to call home. So I want to fight to make Maui a better place. And as for myself, I've been working in construction and project management for the past 7 years after getting out of school from UH Manoa with a degree in finance. And I think I have some really good ideas that I could bring to the state legislature to make life easier and more affordable for people here in Hawaii.
What specifically have you been doing in terms of construction, and also what have you been doing in terms of civic engagement? Have you been involved in any committees or commissions over this time?
So for the first part of that, for construction, yeah, I've been managing commercial construction, some public works, and then also renewable energy, specifically solar installations. And then for, outreach and involvement in the community, it's been, a lot of volunteering, as, putting my own time out there. So a couple things I'm involved with Maui Search and Rescue. Was when I had more time, I was actually able to be out there volunteering, looking for missing people, missing persons. I was involved in the Amanda Eller search out there a lot as well. And then with different church groups and communities and, a few other things like that, serving people more so than in governance or anything like that.
And just one last piece of that, have you done any testifying in any of the committees, either on the county council locally or local commissions or on a state level?
No, I have not personally. I've submitted email and letter testimonies, no physical presence to any of that. Luckily, they have more of it from COVID. They were allowing digital submissions. So that was...
Thank you for that, Dan. Our next question will come from Lucianne Dene.
Thank you, Paul. And thank you for agreeing to run for office and come out and bring your ideas and solutions, Dan. I'd like to ask you, I don't live in your district, but I know many people who do. And you seem very motivated to look for solutions. What do you think are some of the key problems that need to be solved in representing your district, and of course, Maui as a whole, but specifically your district, District 12, you have some of the largest ranches on Maui. You have some, you have people being overrun by axis deer. I'm sure you know what's in the headlines, but what do you think you would work on? And what do you hear from people in the community that they really want someone to get in there and make something happen? What are those key areas?
Yeah, you touched on a few of them, and a couple of the ones that keep coming up are water rights, agriculture, and also the fact that, the water infrastructure itself. So for upcountry Maui, including Haiku and a lot of that as well, we don't have the water bandwidth to, provide a new water meter. So you hear about the 28 years on a water meter waiting list or stuff like that. So that's just kind of ridiculous. And that's really just because our state and our county haven't really been working together on that. So I understand that's a county issue, but as a state, I'd like to get involved to do some more, intergovernmental coordination to appropriate some state funds to make sure that water is there for the right kind of development, and also the fact that
Have you
when they
heard
do,
ideas about that? Any specific ideas?
yeah, I mean, some people are talking about drilling a well, and the other thing is surface collection. But another thing that they're doing currently is it's just a pump system failure. So they don't have a simple quick fix would be upgrading the pumps. Spending some money on that. But another thing to go in with that and sustainability, we're using a lot of like potable water to water things, and any kind of new development. Specifically, there's like the Hawaiian homes. As those start going in, and any new development that does get approved should be using and repurposing wastewater to, for municipal grounds, whether if that's like parks and stuff like that, they get it done. But as far as every time you flush a toilet in your house, more than likely you're flushing away drinking water. So look at getting some of these things into legislation for new developments to have that taken care of, so you cover the sustainable factor as well. And
Thank
then
you.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Keep going.
Oh yeah, and then I mean we could keep going, but and maybe you'll have some questions on agriculture later. But yes, as you mentioned, we do have a lot of ranches here, and I specifically want to see more small ranches, more homeowners and farmers market type farming going on, and have more agriculture investment for that stuff for those guys as well.
Thank you. Bruce, take it away.
Thank you. For me, the sign of a true statesman is not one who just sits back and votes, but champions a bill, brings it forward, sees it from beginning to end. If you were elected for state rep, what would be your 3 primary bills that you would want to champion through the state legislature?
Yeah. So one of the first ones is cost of living. I really want to see a path to home ownership. And then whether if you're a homeowner, prospective homeowner, or renter, one thing that helps is the cost of, debt servicing that. So like, for instance, when we had historically low interest rates, you saw the home ownership price, go up. We're at like 1.1 million or something for the median home housing price. And a lot of that is based on the mortgage rate, about what people are willing to, spend. So if you're able to lower the cost of home ownership, you can lower the cost of rentals and so forth. So one thing that I really want to do is everybody's talking about affordable housing and developments. And then an affordable housing development is only a portion of the housing that's getting built that's being called affordable, which is more or less still pretty expensive and requires further development of the land. And I love Maui being natural and beautiful, and what I remember growing up seeing. So I'm wanting to control development to an extent. It's necessary, but no one's doing anything about the current housing. So there's affordable housing programs. There's like some first-time home buyer incentives. But what I really want to see is a tax incentive for selling to an owner occupant. So we have a lot of foreign investment banks, businesses that buy property as income properties. And if you were to have a homeowner, let's take yourself, for example, if you have a home, you bought it 40 years ago, probably bought it for $1 million less than it's worth now. You might have, in other words, about $1 million worth of capital gain liability, outside of federal considerations and other kind of credits they offer you. But if you were to have forgiveness of capital gains, if you sell to an owner occupant or Hawaii resident, what you do is you buy back a buffer for people who live here versus like a bank or someone trying to possess land. So then you create a little bit of a buffer there. With our tax rate being 11%, that could be as much as $100,000 to $200,000 for each owner occupant. So that's one thing I would like to see put forward. Additionally, I would like to see the cost of living be reduced by removing the GET sales surcharge on food. So Hawaii is one of those ones where we kind of have more or less a flat GET, but in the mainland, they don't charge you for food. I was kind of surprised when I go travel, I see the different scales of tax rates and everything like that. But instantly take 4% off the cost of living by not taxing food that much more. And then, yes, as I mentioned, some of the things about the water infrastructure to put forward initiatives to, first thing would be like a study to see how you could do the most impact with whether if that's you could appropriate enough funds and get bids for RFPs to go drill and put in a well, or simply just replace the pump systems. But yes, and then actually, if you want to throw a third one out there, one thing that I would like to put forward is a restriction. I don't know if it's going to happen naturally, as is already, but I'd like to put out there a restriction on the executive privileges of the state and mayoral authorities when it comes to declaring emergency proclamations.
Ray, would you elaborate on the emergency proclamations? What were your thinking on that?
Yeah, so I think a quick one to fix that process is right now we don't have any way of having it reviewed other than suing, right? So if you don't like it, you got to sue and then go through the court system. And that's kind of what happened with, the past couple of years. But I don't think that should be the burden on the citizens to sue for their freedoms. I think it should be the obligation of the state's courts to review every emergency proclamation, not to restrict them so that they can react if they need to, but it should be a mandatory review.
Okay, thank you very much.
Great. We'll have Lucienne has another appointment. So Lucienne will ask the next question. Lucienne?
You're so sweet. Paul, it's obvious you've given a lot of thought to some of these things. I don't know if you've studied the record of Senator Representative Yamashita, but he has prides himself on bringing a lot of funds back to Maui in general. Would you comment on your philosophy about this and how you would either keep those funds going or bring other funds in? How you would prioritize your efforts there to bring funding, like state funding, for county-wide projects?
Yeah, I've seen the different infrastructure programs for the schools, highways, and stuff like that. And obviously, as the state, you need to take care of what your stewardship is, and that's the state's responsibility. So yes, very much to go with that. I think Maui in general is getting kind of lost to the Oahu centrism. So everything in Oahu, it kind of runs the whole state, all the the major population centers there for good reason. But I don't support any of the things that would continue to go there for the rail. As far as the state taxpayers are going, that doesn't serve the county of Maui and people in Maui County.
I think if you look, money from Maui doesn't. It's hotel taxes and specific revenue, like when you check on your excise tax. If you don't live in Oahu, your money doesn't go to the rail. I think there was a bill to try to make it that way, but you guys all should check your facts. I don't think it's federal money that's going to the rail, which is taxpayer, but I don't think tax money from Maui goes to the rail. But I'm talking about funds that Mr. Yamashita brings back to Maui for projects on Maui. He's famous for bringing back lots of funds. So I'm just wondering, would that be something that you think needs to continue, or or would you have different priorities to bring funds back for? Like, he doesn't bring back a lot of funds for our watershed maintenance, for instance, but he does bring back for paving roads and things like that.
Right. It just would be different priorities, especially since the water infrastructure is paling. But yeah, actually, to go to the statement earlier, there's actually $2.8 billion of state taxpayer money in general that has gone to the rail. Wherever that came from is another consideration, but still coming from the state. Funds.
It comes from special funds, like from hotel taxes and things. So it's not just every person in Maui is taxed to pay for the rail. Anyway, well, I'll let that go. But that's been my research, because I never liked the rail and I wanted to know, where the money was coming from. So anyway, I'm going to bow to the next person. Would that be you, Ann?
No, it'll be Asia Iyer next.
Okay, Asia, Mahalo.
So I am actually in your district, so I'm excited as the one interviewer here. And Lucian kind of grabbed my question because, Kyle Yamashita does bring a lot of funds to Maui, and I think you answered that well enough, so I won't continue with that question. But I kind of along the same lines, though, when you become a state rep, you're given an opportunity to take on leadership roles in different committees or in different areas of the state house. Where do you see yourself going? What do you see yourself doing in the state house if you're elected?
Coincidentally, I think I would slide right into the finance committee, where he's exactly at. I mean, that's inconsequential, I guess, but that's what my background is, my degree, my undergrad degree. And I manage budgets and stuff like that for a business right now. So I feel very comfortable with numbers and budgets and all that stuff. And actually, the funny thing is our state actually had a operating surplus the past couple of years. So whether if you get that extra money from somewhere else, wherever that gets spent, they're going to, exactly. But the to go along with what you're saying about where the funds are coming back, one thing I'd like to see for agriculture, for smaller business, is really low interest loans to small businesses and farmers to encourage local crop growth for food, for feeding the people here, because we could be running into a food shortage problem in the near future. And that's something we'd like to get ahead of.
Great. This is kind of a more personal question, just because I know our viewers like to hear things a little more candid, but what have you enjoyed about running for office so far? I've been a candidate in the past, and a few of the people here on the call have also, and it's really scary and really fun at the same time. So just talk a little bit about that, maybe just candidly, what have you enjoyed?
It's been really nice to be able to meet a bunch of people. That's a great question, honestly. Yeah, to be able to talk with all the different governor candidates and mayoral candidates and congressional and everybody who's, wanted to reach out. And some, as you get to one side of the party, they'll typically want to, build you up and give you a little mentoring, just even within the political party system. And yeah, it's been a great experience, and a lot of people are motivated and willing to help and provide advice. So yeah, I would say that just getting connected with people and hearing more issues, like it's one thing coming in from your own perspective with your own things that you care about, but it's another to actually start hearing people that you're going to be representing, by definition of the job. So that's big plus.
So when or not do you consider yourself, is this like the beginning of an even more involved civic engagement, I guess is what I'm hearing from you when you say that you are enjoying this. Do you see yourself, if you don't win this election, continuing to reach out?
Yeah, I mean, I'm always going to be doing what I can to advance the interests of my family, my community. One thing, for instance, right now that I'm going through is I have a 5-year-old who's now going to be going into kindergarten. As we're looking at the past couple years with the different restrictions the Department of Education's been doing, I don't support all the masking of children. We're the last state actually in the whole nation that's still doing that. So they go and they wear their mask when they sit in school, and then they go home and take it off, or the teachers go and take theirs off, or however that all works. I don't understand the health and logic behind it, but nonetheless, that's an issue that I'm going to have to combat if that's still there in August when I send my son for his first day of school. So yeah, I mean, I've been out, protesting for a lot of those causes already for the past 2 years. So.
Thank you.
Great. We'll have Ann next.
Aloha, Dan. I wanted to ask you, I know we're all aware that the state government here is dominated and full control of the party with Democrats. And many critics say that it's not really balanced. It does not enough Republicans occupying some of those positions. And I just wanted to ask you to share, like, what is it that motivated you to become a Republican member of the Republican Party?
I would say that I just aligned with them a little more than the Democrat Party as far as that all goes. I guess personally, before 8 years ago, I would have defined myself as a libertarian. That's how I always had voted personally. And then I think a lot of the, people first kind of stuff that the Republican Party is pushing and representing, and also the fact that I've always been fiscally conservative and, just believe in people more so than authority telling them what to do. So I like Emerson, if you're familiar with the author, a lot of that self-reliance, I, like just the same as you, I believe that you know the best to navigate your own life, and I don't want to step in and tell you what to do with your life. So I think that's something that a lot of stuff that's coming from the Republican Party that I agree with help motivate me.
Are there any other Republican state senators or House of Rep that you identify with or have influenced you?
More so on the candidate side. I've are you talking about locally here or nationally or elsewhere?
National, yes.
Nationally, yeah.
That have been, yeah.
Yeah, Rand Paul is one that I like a lot.
Okay.
He speaks his mind, and sometimes he's not always right, but he's always got something that he says, and he doesn't care what you think about it.
Okay. All right. Well, thank
Great.
you for that.
Dan, I will do the next question. And that's about one of the biggest debates that's been happening in our state legislature has been about minimum wage. And certainly in terms of a wage that is livable also. What is your thoughts about that, and should the government be involved with that process?
Yeah, that's one that I've seen a lot of people go many ways on. Personally, I don't think that the government really has a way of affecting it. I think that it basically would just navigate it. If you were to pick a number, whatever that number is, like if our minimum wage had to be $20 or $25 an hour or whatever, I believe that it just artificially inflates everything else. It is nice to be able to tend it up so that, you're encouraging and basically mandating the fact that businesses have to pay what's the livable wage. But, ultimately, I think it comes down to a person problem and a people problem, because as long as people are willing to buy the bottom dollar thing, which is made in China, shipped here for pennies, and then they want to have the box stores that pay people the lowest wage so that they can have the lowest possible price, those things are always going to work their way out to be that way. It's going to take like a population shift to change some of that mentality. But in the short term, if you were to just all of a sudden take a box store employee and start paying them $25 an hour, the goods on the shelves are not going to be the same price. So the cost of that minimum wage gets ultimately borne on the middle class, because the companies, the shareholders, whoever it will, they're going to have their ideal profit margins, and they're going to realize those profit margins. I don't believe that businesses pay taxes, and it just passes on reasonable costs to the consumer as much as they can. And one of the things with minimum wage, so for instance, if you had a $30 an hour job right now and the minimum wage is 10, but I think those places already pay like 15 or something, your boss isn't going to give you a raise right away if he doesn't have to. So now all of a sudden, if you bring the bottom up to the middle, all of a sudden you give an extra $10 an hour purchasing power to another category of the work class. People in the middle are getting squeezed the hardest, to be honest. So it's not really fair either way you look at it. I know that that's not a real answer, but I guess the essence is I just don't think that that's a solution to the problem.
I see. And certainly, what do you propose then for people who are not able to sustain. They're doing 3 jobs right now. And it was interesting. If you look at the last, 15 years that when the minimum wage hasn't been risen at all, the level of inflation has skyrocketed. So you're saying that when you increase the wage, you're going to increase inflation and the cost to all the other people. But is that true? Because when you look at our history, our brief history here, that has not been the case.
Yeah, I don't think inflation is correlated, because inflation we can't control as a state. The federal government and the Federal Reserve prints what they print, and they have their monetized interest rate, whatever that is, right? Their policy comes out and we live with it. So part of that we're seeing in housing costs. So like we said, the example of 40 years ago, if you bought a house for $100,000, you can't buy that. You can't even buy the lumber for that right now. So what's happening is the dollar is losing value, and as it loses value, everything's prices are going up. So that's why I was saying I want to tax people less. So that's the answer to that. I just want to make cost of living down by the encumbrance of living here going away. So if you were to tax inflation, tax capital gains or tax stuff like that on inflation, you're taxing someone for something that is an expense, And then when it comes to there's another part in your question that I felt like I needed to answer, but you were asking one other bit there.
It was primarily about how do we deal with people who have 3 jobs also,
right,
and just trying to make ends meet.
Right. Yeah. So focusing on getting the cost of living down, like I said, remove 4% off the board of all food expenses, getting rid of GET tax on food sales, lowering the cost of housing by providing tax incentives for home ownership, and ultimately providing more agriculture and more work elsewhere. If they don't want to have that lower income job, they can find a job elsewhere. I know that's something a lot of people have been said, but a lot of these, some of these jobs are, kind of more suited towards teenagers or people in their early mid 20s, stuff like that.
Great. Thank you, Dan. Asia Iyer will be next.
So I am excited for you to have your kindergartners start school next year. I have 5 children in school. And so a lot of my day-to-day dealings with the state have to do with the state education that we have here. Have you looked into the issues with the state education, and have you thought of some ways that maybe you can contribute to positive change?
Yeah. So with respect to education, I know we have a retention problem. So we're losing teachers because cost of living, they don't like living here. Whatever the reason is that's contributing to it, it's not working. So people are leaving. We have a very low retention rate. And they're also working with facilities that are in deferred maintenance. I mean, I believe it's somewhere around 24% of our budget is education as a state. But we are just not finding a way to get it done. So I think that one thing to be done is to simply just audit deeply into what is the problem, where is the money being spent. I mean, I've worked on, state projects. I've seen what things cost, and there's got to be ways to do it cheaper, and that can be further determined by digging into it. We don't need $400 toilets. We don't need that kind of stuff. But what I was trying to say is in addition to that, the voucher system is something that a lot of people are throwing around right now. So the idea that if you don't send your kid to a certain school, you can send them somewhere else, and then get a tax credit for that. So if you are paying taxes, whether if your kids are in school or not, or I'm paying taxes and my kids aren't in school yet, we're paying for education. But for that small window that your kids are going to school and actually using the service. If you choose not to use the service, there's an amount that can be established, whether if that's, $2,700 to $3,500 a head or something like that. You can get a voucher, and then you can seek education elsewhere and provide competition to schools. And then some of the arguments that have been going back and forth with that are that, so you start taking away, students, some schools are funded by the head. You start messing with some of those things, you'll see what that are. But if we have a problem where teachers are overloaded and understaffed, even if you just take some kids out of the equation, that relieves some of that burden. And then also you would be providing, better education across the board by having a little more competition in there. Hopefully there would be a way to work that out to where you could impose a tax increase at the same time for education with as far as like an allocation within the state. So you can pull in more money for it, but also at the same time offer a credit so that you can help the existing state school. And then you can also help other options, private school or other things like that.
So do you don't see a problem with it being too big of a school district, or have you looked at that? I mean, I've taught, so I'm a consultant, and I'm brought into the schools often to teach, and the teacher retention, we're not losing teachers off island. It's that they're paid too little, so they just go to other jobs.
They just quit.
They get paid $23 an hour to teach, or they can go get paid $60 an hour to work at a hotel plus tips. They get paid really well. They're well-educated people. So we're losing teachers, not because necessarily they're overworked, but it's real hard to go into a job that's very, day to day, very, very challenging, but it's just an underpaid job. So I don't know if, I would love to discuss this later when we're not on the interview, but I mean, have you looked at maybe just that the state doesn't have a history of managing its education very well. So are there solutions that take the state out of that equation?
Yeah. I mean, the voucher system certainly does. It encourages private school. But it goes back to the first argument you were talking about, minimum wage, and then people's willingness to do a job or service for the agreed rate. If there's something else in the market offering better, they're going to go somewhere else. So I think that in that case, if those teachers have the option to work somewhere else that pays them more, if you're staying in education, let's just say that they're going to a private school that's paying them 20% more, 40% more, which might be the case, versus another type of industry, that's something else.
Yeah, no, it's usually just to totally different industries.
Yeah, I know.
I'm excited for you to look at that more. I would take a hard look at what the teachers union actually has done a lot of this research on what it would take to retain teachers and to really fulfill the constitutional, state constitutional requirement to educate the children. Right. So that's something maybe when you have children in there, you become a lot more invested in what those solutions are. But I appreciate your answers. Go ahead, Paul.
Great. We'll have Bruce Douglas next.
Aloha. Tell me, what did you learn from the COVID-19 that we just went through, and how would you want to see the state handle that differently? What would you like to do about it for future as well?
Yeah. Thanks. Great question, Bruce. That's actually one of the number one things that got me to start running for office, because I stared at, going down the highway and seeing a National Guard roadblock to verify my essential nature, or getting a letter from my boss to go from one place to another. And actually I fly a lot for work. So I had some jobs on Kauai and Big Island that I was going to, and going through applying to civil defense for essential worker status to get somewhere, and then having police check up on you to make sure you're doing what you're doing. It just screamed 1984 a little too much for me. And I didn't want to ever see that happen again, let alone, get worse. So, I want to leave my kids the option to just live and do outside of whatever considerations. They should be able to move freely and live and enjoy life, go to the beach, not have a ticket for having umbrella at the beach or stuff like that. So yeah, I have, thought a lot about that. And the main thing that I want to do is restrict the ability of the executives to take those privileges and make sure that if they do, that there's consequences and they get reprimanded for that. And, some of it could be, if it's bad enough, could be thrown out of the office. I want to give the court the ability to do that and make that decision. And then, to add on to that, in addition to this, the different layers of things like they're pumping you full of vaccines and things that they say that you have to take. And I understand that there's different, requirements for public school and different shots that you can take, but there's always a religious exemption and there's always something that you can say no. And it's never been to the status of you can't even come and sit down in this restaurant or you're subhuman. You got to sit outside. That's straight up discriminatory in my book. So I want to make sure that there's no discrimination for whatever you are, whoever you are. There's some people that can't even medically take those things. So I have some friends that are firefighters and police officers that were basically chosen to retire or not continue to have their employment, go on administrative leave. In the medical industry, I have a relative that works for a medical facility that they were asked the same thing, but luckily they were able to get a religious exemption, but it was an application process. It wasn't like your instant right or anything like that. It was, answer your questions, show your papers, and let us make a decision or determination on you. I could see this getting a lot worse, like a slippery slope type of thing. Eventually having different requirements to operate in society and be a human being, show your everything about as far as we go. I mean, it's not just Hawaii, but it's seemed like the whole world right now that people are being required to do this. So what I can do is I can stand up and defend my home and my community and the people that agree with me and support me. And I'll do that here within my power.
Great.
Thank you for that.
And we're at 4:45. So Dan, is there anything that you'd like to say in conclusion? Anything that we haven't covered that you think is important?
No, I don't think so, but Aja, definitely hit me up on the side and I'd be happy to talk more about education with you. But yeah, my name is Dan. I'm from Maui, born and raised here, fourth generation Ha'ole, but running for Upcountry District 12. So you can look for me on the ballot in November.
Great. Thank you, Dan. And I'd just like to remind our viewers who are on Facebook that you can also listen to these interviews at MauiPonoNetwork.org and also on Akaku TV at channel 54. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll have more interviews to come. Aloha.
Aloha.